kind of random.
What up, y'all? Welcome to another Hip Hop Now podcast tier list. I am your host, Vegas of Hip Hop Now podcast. Glad you came through. And we're basically going to get right to it. We're getting into a tier list that breaks down all of the Eminem albums, his whole discography, right? Please know that this podcast is supported by patrons over at patreon.com/hip hop now. So if you would like to become one, just visit that very website. The link is in the description. So as you can see, we're doing Eminem discography and we got a couple of tiers here. But before I get into what those tiers are, a couple of disclaimers for you. One, I am a big Eminem fan, right? Or let me not just say big, because big implies something different. I'm an Eminem fan, straight up and down, right? Ever since his debut album, the Slim Shady LP, I've been a fan. What I am not is an Eminem stan, which is a person who likes everything he does, no matter how it sounds or how it comes out or whatever the case may be. They like it anyway. I'm not one of those people for any artist. Okay, maybe one or two, but admittedly, there's a difference. Stans don't admit their stans. They don't know their stans. They just are stans. But nevertheless, I said all of that to say that I have no biases towards why I like one album over another or dislike another album. Is purely off my musical taste as a hip hop fan and a fan of Eminem. So we'll get interested. Another disclaimer is I'm not going to include albums like Bad Meets Evil or the 8 Mile soundtrack or any offshoot projects that feature Eminem, similar to what I did with my other tier list, because of the simple fact that I think it detracts away from the soloist, the solo work. You know what I'm saying? So my focus with these tier lists is to focus on the solo projects, meaning his albums, the albums that are solely Eminem. Now there's one project here that's not officially, but I count it anyway because it was like the first official thing. If you are underground hip hop head, you know what I'm talking about. Or if you're looking at the screen and you don't need glasses, you'll see. But you'll see anyway. Plus, I just want to let a couple of y'all know, if you like this tier list and this video in particular, you can visit the B-Roll Network on YouTube and check out the other tier lists I did. I did one for Snoop Dogg. I did one for Ghostface Killer. I did a combination of Jay-Z and Nas albums. I also did Common. So check those out. Let me know what you're thinking. Hit the like button on everything. Hit the subscribe button. B-Roll Network on YouTube. Now let's look at the categories, right? So with the categories here, we have at the very top, Rap God. That will be basically what some people will call classic or hands down the best album or albums within his discography. Under that, we have Slim Shady. Still a hot album, probably not the best album, but very close to that. Then in the middle, we have Marshall Mathers. That'll be for albums that are okay, not great, definitely not classics, but not necessarily garbage. Then we have Elvis a Rap. This album is basically trash. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't even waste your time. It's pretty much garbage. And lastly, obviously, the last one being Stan, meaning if you like this album, you're probably a Stan. Now, I know that's a little harsh because we have different tastes and opinions are subjective, but nevertheless, as a music fan who listens to music deeply and gives everything a fair shot when I listen and a long listen, I have to say some shit is just whack. You can't get around it. So let's get right into it, man. So first, we're going to start off with a project that was, I won't say released, but came out sometime around the year 1996 and was reissued around 2003, I believe. It's Eminem's debut, quote unquote, album, kind of. I mean, it's like Mobb Deep's first album, Juvenile Hell. Most people don't even see that as their first album. They look at the Infamous as their first album because it was the breakout album. But Infinite, even though I don't have information in front of me to say it came from a label or whatever, but it was really people's introduction or hip hop fans' introduction to Eminem Infinite. And this project in general, to me, is not the Eminem you know. It's just not. It's more of a underground. I mean, he's always been a wordplay guy, but his flow is more similar to someone like AZ. Obviously, this is 1996. Hip hop is a little bit different from when Eminem would eventually drop, which I believe he dropped in '99 with Dr. Dre and Aftermath. But this was a very different project. Now, with this, I'm just going to put this at Marshall Mathers because it's not bad, right? But when you think in the context of this being Eminem's quote unquote first project to put out there, when you think in the context of the year 1996 and the influence of other rappers on him at that time, like who was hot at that time, what type of rapping styles wise was popular, and obviously there was various styles, but when you look at the way or you listen to this Infinite joint and you hear how Eminem's rhyming, it becomes pretty clear that this is definitely out of 1996, that the influence is definitely East Coast, and definitely underground with the style in which he raps. So that's that. Next up is 1999's Slim Shady LP. For me, personally, I think this deserves a Slim Shady. Now, I'm kind of shocked at myself for even placing it there when I probably feel more like Rap God for it, but I'm trying to keep it 100. When I first heard the Slim Shady LP, what I liked most about it was Eminem's originality. And I'm not necessarily talking about flows. I'm talking about the total package of what made Eminem, right? The quirky lyrics, the basically sounding like a white boy that can rap, as opposed to a white boy that can rap but sounds like a brother. Eminem is indistinguishable from anybody black. You know he's a white boy by what he raps about, by how he sounds when he says it. Um, but he's really dope lyrically, and this was me back in 1999 buying the cassette. Hearing Guilty Conscience and saying I kind of like that record with him and Dr. Dre, how they did that, but feeling like it might be too goofy for me, based off of that record. And listening to the album on a bus ride, like back to college, and I was just like, wow, this is really dope and different from everything else I'm listening to. So for me, it's a personal favorite. It ranks pretty high, but if I was just ranking it as an album within his discography, I can't say it's one of the best. I mean, obviously it's one of the best, but I mean like top tier rap god. That's all I'm saying. Following that is the Marshall Mathers LP. Now, I'm not even going to hold you. Rap God. This is arguably, but almost unanimously, referred to as Eminem's best album. Hands down, the Marshall Mathers LP was Eminem at the height of his powers as far as lyrically, but also success. Such a dope yet disturbing album at the same time. Because whereas with the Slim Shady LP, the craziest thing you heard on there was like, Bonnie and Clyde, him and his daughter, getting rid of his wife's body. I mean, his baby mom's body, which obviously, subject matter wise, in the real world, this is a terrible thing. But to write that kind of record, and it's not literally just on a face value type record, it's literally well thought out lyrically. And that's what I took away from it. But when you go to the Marshall Mathers LP, oh, he steps that up big time to points where I remember a lot of reports on how disturbing it was, but it didn't slow his success for him to talk about not only killing his baby moms, but his moms. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot there that's can be considered weird, and I get it, subject matter. But if I could listen to brothers flipping cocaine in every which way, but they're not wealthy yet, I can listen to a crazy white boy taking pills and mushrooms and talking some whatever he's talking. Nevertheless, Marshall Mathers LP, such a dope album, definitely rap god status. Following that is the Eminem Show, an album that I thought back then was just Slim Shady, but over the years it's aged like fine wine, and I think it's rap god status. Yes, I said it. Marshall Mathers LP and the Eminem Show back to back was big. Now, the knock on Eminem as far as the hip hop community is concerned, especially those who don't like his music, and I'm not knocking people who don't, but the knock is when you look at the singles, right? It's always the goofy. My name is, Guess Who's Back. You know what I'm saying? Even Guilty Conscious to a certain extent. He's always had real like goofy singles. But that's not what make the albums dope. That's not why people, most hip hop fans who champion Eminem lyrically or even like his albums, that's not really why they like him. Those songs are cute, but they probably either get skipped by Eminem fans or you just let it rock because it's Eminem. You expect it. But the Eminem Show, I think, had a lot of dope records on there. You know what I'm saying? Again, I felt like on this album, he was maturing lyrically, even though he still had, some of them Slim Shady isms and said things that made you look at your, stereo like, what? What'd he say? But nevertheless, songs like White America, Until I Collapse, they can't be overlooked. You know what I'm saying? As far as just good records lyrically, not blow your mind, blow you out the water is the best thing that's ever happened to hip hop. No, no, no. I'm not saying all that. I'm just saying, as far as when you think about a song you can listen to, and when the rapper's performing the lyrics and you hear the lyrics, you're instantly hanging on every word because it's interesting, regardless of the subject matter. So with the Eminem Show, I got a lot of that, and I felt like it was, I don't know, I felt like it was almost like a grand finale. You know what I'm saying? Because it felt really big coming off of the Marshall Mathers LP, and I kept thinking like, I don't think he can continue to go this route with the Slim Shady, Marshall Mathers, King Kniff skits, and who he gonna kill in his family next. Like, I don't think he can continue to go that route. And I was right, because then that was followed up by Encore, and I'm not even gonna hold you with Encore. That is a stand. That album to me, when I heard it, was the Slim Shady, hi, my name is, I'm crazy, I'm a white boy. The formula was dead and tired. And it showed. It showed in this album. It didn't give off to me, in my opinion, any direction of him growing. It felt like, whereas the Eminem Show sound like Eminem was growing lyrically, Encore felt like, and I know it's an encore to the Eminem Show, I get it, but Encore felt like stagnation, right? It felt like, all right, what else you got? This is getting old. You know what I'm saying? That's literally what it felt like, and it showed a lot in this particular album. And I've listened to it maybe twice back then when it came out, and then never listened to it again. Now, Eminem took years. I want to say 5 years, if not a little bit more, to drop his next album, which was called Refill. And this joint, I would give this a Marshall Mathers. And I only say that because I know it sounds like I'm contradicting myself to say something like Encore sound like, the same old retread of the same territory that made him successful. And, now it sounds like garbage because we'd already got too many of them and it's corny now. And, time has passed. Refill only worked for me because we had an Eminem break, right? And Refill was more of Eminem really diving down that Slim Shady rabbit hole, right? It's really his dark album. It's like if Redman's There's a Dark Side is like a really dark album for him sonically. That's what this is for Eminem. Refill was like, not Refill. I meant Relapse. I kept saying Refill because that's what the follow up is. But the gap basically from Encore to Relapse was a good 5 years. And when he dropped Relapse and he had a deluxe version or whatever, because it was more so focused on the Slim Shady character and it kind of had hints of horrorcore, I kind of liked it because it was like, all right, well, it's not like you haven't, done this before in a song or two here and here throughout your discography thus far. But an album that's somewhat focused on it is a little bit different from what we got before. You know what I'm saying? Before we would get a Slim Shady record, maybe one serious joint, maybe one lyrical, then maybe two goofy joints that could be the singles. This was more so like just dark Eminem with the bars, but again, more like horrorcore. And then he dropped this joint, Relapse, the Refill. I actually like the Refill better than the original Relapse. Now, Refill is only basically an EP, like bonus songs from Relapse. But I think Eminem was just in his bag lyrically. And also, one thing that I neglected to like mention here is throughout this time, Eminem was still struggling with the death of his good friend and partner, Proof. He also, had addiction, I believe, to I don't know what his addiction was to, but I believe it had to do with pills or whatever. And Relapse was kind of a play on that. As even though he had he kind of recovered from it, which brings up the next album, Recovery, which I'm gonna keep it 100. Marshall Mathers. Now, is this an album that I go back to and listen like, yo, this is my jam? Not necessarily. What I like about this album is it's not like any other album he had prior. You know what I'm saying? When he dropped Recovery in 2010, the next year, mind you, it wasn't shocking to me because, like I said with Encore, it felt like, or like I said with the Eminem Show, Eminem was supposed to be growing beyond that, right? And you wanted to see him grow into doing something different or a little more of something different. And Recovery is an album full of that. It's not the Eminem you used to. It's not a lot of Slim Shady isms on there, if any at all, maybe one or two. And it comes across just like the title states, as an album that's really about healing and talking about things that are better to him in his life. And I really enjoyed it for that reason because it was different. I felt like the music was fitting. I felt like, as far as the beats, I felt like his lyrics were fitting, and we were really getting to know Marshall Mathers. through this, particular album. And again, you can look at one album in the space of when it came out and try not to compare it to the others. But once you're a fan of an artist and you've been through four albums with them and they're still going, you're more willing to accept them taking chances with their music. You know what I'm saying? Some people don't. Some people, want their artists to remain the same. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I think in this case with Recovery, it kind of worked for Eminem. So again, it's not something to me that's blew my mind. But I felt like it was a good album for what it was, especially from when it came within his discography. Now, the Marshall Mathers LP 2, follow up to probably my favorite album, the Marshall Mathers LP. My expectations were through the roof, led by the single Rap God, which is top tier to me. And that video and what Eminem was doing on that track was crazy. But this album just wasn't that good, y'all. It just wasn't. My bad. It just wasn't that good. Elvis a rap. Only reason why it's not staying is because there's some redeeming songs on there like Rap God, joints on there that are dope, he's spitting, but it just was not worthy of that name to be a sequel to the Marshall Mathers LP. I think sometimes when artists do sequels to what they deem their biggest album or what fans say their best album is, I think they have not all the time, but I think sometimes they have a disconnect with what it is about that album that people like. And it's not just recreating those sounds or those feelings, but it's more so the context of the moment. There was no way he could recapture that moment through his music because he was different back then. He could try, and I think he did that in some cases, but the essence of that first Marshall Mathers LP that's like in a time capsule. There's no way to bottle that up and bring it forward. The only way you can do that is by improving on it, and sometimes improving on it, and sometimes that's just not going to be the case. And with the Marshall Mathers LP2, it was a huge letdown for me. Like I was just kind of like, man, it just ain't good. It's just not good. So then we got a joint that I don't know, like within the context of this album Revival, I started to feel like Eminem was doing it again, right? You had the Slim Shady LP, you had the Marshall Mathers LP, you had the Eminem Show, you had Encore, right? You have all these albums that kind of are brothers and sisters to each other as far as how they go, right? Slim Shady LP, Marshall Mathers LP. Slim Shady Show, I mean the Eminem Show, the Encore, right? But then you got Relapse and Recovery, and they both worked for me. But then you came out with Revival, and I ain't gonna hold you. This album is pure garbage. I mean, it is whack. Like, premise wise, I get where you were going. Eminem's gonna make a political album, and when you're a fan of somebody, you're kind of like, I could kind of see how I could get that off because Donald Trump is the president, and Donald Trump is the type of cultural figure that Eminem would attack back in the days, and attack him in creative ways. And even, to be angry at society and, everything that's going on, it was kind of perfect. And you call it Revival, okay, cool. But man, the execution was just terrible. Like the bars just wasn't there. I felt like it was garbage. I was like, man, maybe Eminem's done lyrically because maybe my expectations was too high, but I just did not feel that album whatsoever. And a lot of people did. And Eminem hurt us. And not too long after that, like literally not too long after that, because Revival came out in 2017, and the next year, 2018, which it really felt like the next month, Eminem dropped Kamikaze. And I think Kamikaze is Slim Shady. And I say that because Kamikaze was Eminem. In some respects, I didn't like this, but addressing people who felt like he fell off, who felt like Revival was garbage, and him showing them lyrically that he's still one of the best. And I think he did that. And I really liked the fact that the criticism fueled him. I just wish it didn't dominate the subject matter on the album. You know what I'm saying? Because, and again, dominate, not address, but dominate. It's one thing to address it. I think he should address it. It's another thing when it becomes the main subject of the whole album. And again, maybe that's the concept. And I was fine with that. But I just liked the bars on here. I just liked the wordplay. And Eminem was like on a mission with this one, so I liked it. And lastly, Music to Murder By, released in 2020, not a very good year. This album was Slim Shady. Yeah, it was Slim Shady to me because I didn't know what to expect. When he came back with another album so soon, to me it was so soon because I know Kamikaze came out in 2018. For some reason, I just thought Eminem was going to take a longer break, maybe 3 or 4 years. But when he came back with this one, I was just like, "Oosh, think he about to do it again. I think he about to start releasing too many albums too close to each other. And they wind up being the same thing." And I was surprised by Music to Murder By because Music to Murder By is what I thought the Marshall Mathers LP 2 would be. Eminem is pretty sharp lyrically throughout this album. I think Eminem on trap beats is really dope. I think he should explore that a little bit more because there are a lot of older artists who aren't really good on that. I think Nas recently showed he could be better. Probably Hit Boy helped out with that because remember when Nas was on that song with Future, his flow was terrible. Jay-Z, obviously, he used to rap like the Fushnikin, so he can do that easy. Uh, but with Eminem's Music to Murder By, just having records like that with trap beats, boom bap, slightly, boom bap, but just the right sounding tracks. I was just like, man, I thought Kamikaze was good. I thought Eminem was sitting on some bars and some beats with Kamikaze. Music to Murder By is a pretty good album. Again, nothing mind blowing, but I wound up liking it a lot. Now, as I look at this, should it be up there in that Slim Shady category? I think I'm going to move it. Now, again, moving it to Marshall Mathers doesn't make it whack. It just says to me, looking at those Slim Shady joints, those are 3 albums on that tier that I could say to myself, I like these albums, and they're damn near as they're very close to being top tier in his catalog. But that Marshall Mathers is like, these are joints I like. These are good albums, you know, for whatever reason. Um, but that's it for the tier list. So let's go over real quick. At Rap God at the very top of the tier is the Marshall Mathers LP and the Eminem Show. The tier below that, the Slim Shady tier list, which is, pretty dope albums, like almost close to classic Eminem, is the Slim Shady LP, Relapse, Refill, and Kamikaze. On a Marshall Mathers level, which is basically good, is Eminem's 1996, I guess you can call it an album project called Infinite. Also, Relapse, Recovery album, and Music to Murder By. Now, Elvis the Rap, there's only one in that category. It's the Marshall Mathers LP. It's basically whack to me. There's some redeeming records on there, like Rap God and some others, but for the most part, it's a very skippable album. You be skipping all day, boy, like you on, you know what I'm saying, with Skip Bailey. You be skipping, okay? Uh, and lastly, the last category being stand, just means these albums are garbage to me, is Encore and Eminem's Revival album. So remember, this tier list is located at tiermaker.com. All you got to do, well, the link will be in the description of this podcast. So you can click on the link. You can get to the tier list yourself. You can place your own order and let me know, what do you think about the categories? Do you believe that Eminem has one good album and the rest are trash? Or you think, after the Eminem show, everything else is garbage? Leave your comments in the comment section below. I'm Vegas of Hip Hop Now Podcast. Remember, this podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts. All you got to do is search for the words Hip Hop Now Podcast, hit that subscribe button, and be locked in. Also, if you would like to support this podcast, the production of this podcast, and all of the content I create, you can visit patreon.com/hiphopnow. Remember, if you don't know how to spell Patreon, don't be embarrassed. The link is in the description. Until next time, y'all, I am not a critic. I'm a fan. Peace.
Drop it on the random.